Okay, it's now 10:30 and we can start. I hope you can all hear me well. So hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending from on the time zone from where you are joining this webinar. So I would like to welcome everyone to this joint BPM-D and Software AG webinar, Deliver Customer Experience Excellence Using Process Mining. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Markus Höltich. I'm the moderator and I will guide you through the webinar now. First, some organizational things during this webinar. All lines are on mute to make it easier for the presenters to speak, and so you can also listen to the presentation without any background noise. And saying that, I hope you can all hear me well. If you have any technical issues with the webinar or with the audio connection, please drop me a message in the chat window and I will try to assist. To make this session more interactive and to give you the chance to raise questions, you can, of course, always submit your questions that you may have at any time during the webinar through the chat window or through the Q&A panel of Zoom. And we will collect all the questions and will answer them during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. The webinar will also be recorded, so in case of any issues or if you want to hear the webinar later again or share it with colleagues, you will find the recorded session of this webinar in the next couple of days at our Software AG YouTube channel. So now let's go ahead and I would like to introduce you to Software AG and BPM-D. Software AG is the global software company which has a proven track record and experience in business transformation, especially with their process management solution ARIS. ARIS has been the #1 business process analysis and management software solution for organizations in the market seeking to embrace digital transformation. And our partner, BPM-D, is a specialist organization that helps repurpose process excellence teams for the dynamic digital age. And based on their ideas and history and knowledge and engagements, I can really say that this is right. BPM-D is really the partner to go for the digital age. Now, next step, let me introduce you to our speakers today. So our first speaker is Kaspar Jans. He's the digital transformation expert at Software AG EMEA. Kaspar worked in the manufacturing industry for almost 20 years in various business and information management positions before joining Software AG, and he consults customers on the application and benefits of adopting process management practices. In his previous employer, he managed a global BPM Center of Excellence for a number of years. And then our second speaker today from BPM-D is Rakesh Kusain. Rakesh has been working at the forefront of business process management for many years. Since joining BPM-D, he has continued to assist companies in strategic execution and in establishing a BPM discipline. He has developed several innovative approaches to solve implementation issues in pragmatic and results-oriented way. And my name is Markus Joltic. I'm the marketing manager for ARIS Process Mining at Software AG, and I will be your host today. So let's go ahead. And now I'm handing over to Kaspar.
No, Rakesh, you mean?
Yeah,
Rakesh.
thanks. Thanks, Marcus, for the lovely introduction. Now that we've had the word from the sponsors, we've introduced BPM-D and Software AG. Let's dive into what we're going to cover in this session today. It is a new concept that we have tried at a few clients, and we see the value of getting more people to leverage this concept. The concept we're going to talk about today is how do you execute your customer experience strategy or the CX strategy and ensure that you get the maximum out of your CX investment. So what we're going to talk about today through the day between Casper and I is we're going to talk about what are the challenges that we've seen organizations face in executing their customer experience strategy. Then we're also going to talk about the key role of operations in executing a CX strategy and how that's often not the focus of these initiatives and how that can become the focus. For that, we'll talk about what are the key CSAT metrics and where do they fall short in terms of execution. Casper is then going to show you how Software AG solutions work to provide a complete suite of solutions around your customer experience, process management, and then process mining to be able to track what's really happening on the ground in terms of customer excellence. We have a short case study and a video that gives you an idea of the art of the possible. And then we'll open up for Q&A. So that's the agenda for today. Happy to answer any queries if you can put them on the chat. So that's what we want to cover. There's a lot to cover. So let's jump in. The first thing we want to talk about, and this is where we quote some of the research. And yes, this is a research done in 2015. But what it says is a lot of organizations have a good CX strategy, and they aspire to be, a customer-first organizations. I have been at client meetings where there's an empty chair for the customer, basically proving the point that we care for the customer. But what I've noticed is a lot of these organizations come up with a cool customer strategy, come up with some good PowerPoints, and PowerPoints that gets the product teams involved, the strategy team involved, and the customer management team involved. But a lot of these firms are not able to deliver their CX plans. And today we're going to just touch upon a few issues that we think cause these issues in terms of execution. Remember, today is not about we as both Software AG and BPM-D. We don't talk about how do you create a good CX strategy. I think that that's not exactly the scope for today. Our scope is once you have a good CX strategy that you've aligned with amongst your leadership team, how do you get that into execution and how do you continuously track and monitor the execution? That's what we focus on. The first thing to understand is what are the challenges? What are the issues that people face in terms of executing their CX strategy? So one is the biggest thing is absence of a customer oriented mindset. Now that I will be challenged if I make that statement, but what I mean by that is customer oriented mindset across the organization. So yes, there'd be a few people from the product team, a few people from the customer experience team, and few people from the strategy team who understand the importance of being customer oriented. But does that trickle down to your operations team, to your supply chain team, to your finance processing team, and so on? And that is where we've seen a lot of gaps in the clients that we've interacted with. And as we continue this discussion, I'm sure Casper is going to give you some examples as well. Then the second point is in the similar vein around executive buy-in. So yes, maybe the CEO buys into the vision, but is that translated to all the key heads in the organization? And then does it even get to the second line in command? Does it get to the right program management team, the change management team, the operations team? And that also causes a lot of issues. And basically what it does is every team starts driving some initiative that they feel is going to drive customer experience, not having a complete visibility and view of the overall strategy. Basically, just to summarize, I think the key point here is, yes, there are certain parts of the members of your organization that would be interested and invested in customers, but does that trickle down to everything that you do in the business? And that's what we want to cover today in detail. Right. So moving on to the next bit, where Casper is going to talk about how do you align operations to your customer experience. So Casper, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Rakesh. All right. So one of the things that is heard very often when you talk about customer satisfaction is that customer is king. And I do want to be a little bit provocative today and question that. But before that, a lot of companies out there, and that's a Gartner research says that 81% of the companies say that they are mostly or completely compete based on customer experience in 2 years' time. So this is 2017, so that means 2019. So by now we should be completely or mostly competing on customer experience. And I think that that's a lot what you see in the marketing branch and in the commercial side, the question is everybody serving the crown? So is everybody within the organization aligned to do what is needed to make that customer experience as smooth as possible? And saying that you're going to have a good customer experience and actually doing it are two completely different things. And then if we can have the next slide, there's always people that argue. Say, listen, customer king, clients do not come first, employees come first. So Richard Branson, who we all know for their Virgin part, and typically Virgin is known for a very good customer experience. And what he basically says is get your internal organization in order first before you start thinking about the customers. Because if your internal organization is on top of the game, on top of their game, and they have the right tools to do their job, they will make sure that they will serve the customer correctly. Now, if we talk about operationalizing and aligning that, put the next one on, because on the next slide, well, some people might recognize this, some might not. This is one of the biggest amusement parks in Europe. It's a top 5, and it's rated very often as the best one from a customer experience point of view. My kids really love this, and we go there every year. And yesterday, I actually made my reservation for next year. Because of COVID, you need to make reservations. And so I called our customer support center to make the reservation because it was not standard, it was not straightforward, so I could not use the web interface. And then this whole amusement park is founded around a magic forest with a lot of fairy tales. And this elegant character is the big bad wolf from the Red Riding Hood fairy tale. And actually, he answered the phone. So I called them up, and it was the wolf who answered the phone. Of course, it was a message, but still, it's a little thing that did turn a big smile on my face. And even Red Riding Hood chipped into that little phone conversation that we had. And it's those little things that they know very well how to operationalize that customer satisfaction. Now, this is just an example I had yesterday evening. If we can get the next slide and go back to the serious stuff. Once this picture loads, I think this picture, to me, pretty much embodies the way that customer satisfaction needs to be operationalized. So on the top of that customer journey model that you see here, the light green boxes, those are the customer interaction points. So this is a customer journey, if you want, and it shows what different steps of interaction a customer has with your organization. Then on the next line, you will find those touch points with the customer-facing organization. So this is where who in our organization is going to have that interaction with the customer. And everything else below that in the last section, so yeah, that one, that is how it connects into your internal organization. So that means that at the moment that you think about a customer satisfaction strategy, and you find out where are my customer touch points and my customer interactions, you can then start drilling down and say, listen, okay, so these are the people in our organization that actually have that interaction. What part of the organization are they in? What kind of activities do they do? What kind of systems do they have to support them? What kind of risks are attached to those interactions? And at the moment that you've document that means that you need to think about it. I think the whole alignment between your internal organization and your customer satisfaction becomes much more apparent. And another, I think, just go back. I got just one slide back. Yeah, thanks. So that the last point, which I also see from experience, is that customer journeys like these that you see here are often mistaken to be one internal process within the organization. But very often, for each of the single interactions a customer has with your organization, there is a number of different internal processes that need to be executed properly. And it's, I think, also the alignment between these internal processes that needs to be on a top level if you want to have top level customer satisfaction grades. Now you can move on, and I'll give the word back to Rakesh and explain why traditional satisfaction metrics might fall short.
Thanks, Casper. So as Casper said, we use CSATs to get a sense of how well are we doing with our customers. There are some issues with the CSAT. Not saying that CSATs don't work, but they don't capture the complete end-to-end customer experience in your organization, because by definition they touch upon things that are customer facing. So maybe that call that Casper made was classed as customer facing, and hence the person interacting with Casper from the organization that he mentioned was very aware of the customer being important, the cost of getting a new customer, and so on. But for example, does the accounts payables team understand the importance of a customer and getting the right invoice in front of the customer at the right time, and ensuring all the delivery notes and the operational logistics is covered? And that's where CSATs fall short. Is there is a need to define some KPIs which measure specific interaction and cycle time with a customer. So we're working with a big telecom company in the UK, where we are busy defining KPIs with them around what are the key cycle times that the customer really cares about. So that when someone is installing a Wi-Fi network for a customer, they get a clear sense of X number of days before this goes live for the customer. And what we're trying to build using similar solutions like Software AG is have that constant view of where you are for an order and how eager is the customer waiting in terms of getting whatever is being promised to the customer. So building KPIs that get you to the operations and build some discipline around the operations to cater to the customer needs is one of the key things where CSAT falls short. The other bit is from an operations perspective, it's very because each operational and each functional team would have a different set of what they think is critical to business. There is a lack of relatability in how a specific customer metric aligns to what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's where, if you remember the earlier chart that Casper showed, having a view of what your customer-centric KPIs are right at the top, and then driving all your business functions and your business matrix based on that actually helps you create an end-to-end picture. And then also it's about understanding the complete end-to-end cycle and understanding what happens when we leave a customer with a delayed SLA or with a not completed product and things like that. Giving that visibility to the operations team is also key. And that's why we think it's time that the CX team start moving into looking at more KPIs around cycle time, around the customer experience, the service provided to the customer, and not just look at CSAT in a more reactive basis after you've had the engagement with the client. Moving on, we make this a little more real with how this actually works. So over to you, Casper.
Yeah, thank you. So what happens is at the moment that you want to use process mining for your customer satisfaction, the first thing you need to understand is what am I capable of mining to start with, and how does that relate to customer satisfaction? And I'll get to that last question in a bit in the next slide, but in this slide, just a couple of examples of how do you structure your internal side of things. And I'm coming back to the quote from Richard Branson, actually saying, listen, make sure that you enable and make your internal employees happy first, and then they will take care of your customers. Now, making your internal employees happy means that they can do their job without having to search for documentation, without having to curse at systems that don't work, without having to troubleshoot every day because of the process not running smoothly. So that means that the whole customer journey management philosophy is that you start with the interaction of the customer. So what do you think the customer think is important, and how does that translate into the way that you internally organize your organization? And that can go as far as we saw. Just stay on. Yeah, thank you. That can go as far as the customer journey mapping that I showed earlier, but also what we call a customer journey landscape, where you basically take all of the different journeys together. And that's from that point you start detailing out. You can have an entire, let's say, practice around the interaction that you have with your customer as a result. The good point is, certainly when you use the ARIS platform, is that all of the elements that you are using in your customer journey management are elements that you already have used in the documentation of your business processes or your landscape or your risk overview. And it's a matter of bringing them together in a different perspective so that you can start to see where the relationships are between the organizational units and the risks and the activities and the processes. And at the moment that you have that kind of visibility and transparency in the way that you document, or basically into your digital twin, you will also be much better able to serve your customer. Now, if we can now switch to the next slide. So as an example, for instance, and I'll come back to that later on with a real life example, what you see here on the screen is a relatively simple KPI tree, a KPI structure. The concept behind it is apparently not evident, because we talk to customers about this quite often, and then you see that every customer has a financial KPI tree. What a lot of organizations have not yet figured out is the fact that below the surface, there is a whole world of what we call process performance indicators, PPIs. And those PPIs relate into your financial KPIs or your business KPIs, if you want. Now, at the moment that you start considering process mining to use for your customer satisfaction, the main question becomes, which parts of my business can I actually measure and mine in order, and that have a relationship to customer satisfaction if you want to go beyond the traditional NPS scores. And one of them, for instance, if you guide your direction a little bit into the middle section of the KPI tree where it says SCDR, that branches out into on time and in full. So SCDR is your delivery reliability. How good are you in delivering products to your customers? And on time in full, or OTIF, is a very good indicator for customer happiness when it comes to their procurement process. So a customer buys products or services from you as an organization. If you deliver on time and in full, then the only thing that stands between you and a happy customer is either the price or the quality of the product, which is difficult to mine on. But on time in full, so the fact if you deliver at the requested moment with the requested quantity is a very clear indicator of customer, at least future customer satisfaction. And that you can mine. So you can actually apply process mining to your more executional systems and say, listen, where do I see problems with my delivery reliability and my capability to deliver the product? And at the moment that I see problems based on mining, you can already anticipate that customer satisfaction in that specific part might not be as high as you want it to be. That also means that in step one, where we mentioned, take a deep dive from your customer interaction into your internal organization, you do basically the same thing here, but you do it from a KPI, finance KPI point of view. So listen, okay, which KPIs have an impact on my customer satisfaction and how can I actually measure them? And then you apply the mining to this. All right, can I have the next slide, please? Because ultimately what you do with process mining is basically looking at the real life execution. So that means that, of course, you have a documented process and the way that you deliver goods to your customer has been documented very well. The real live execution very often is a little bit more complex and different. And that's exactly what process mining does. It picks up the traces that executed processes leave in your systems. And then you can make heads or tails out of it. You can try to figure out and you can reconstruct the way that your processes have been executed. And at that point, when you get to that point, you get to a point where you can say, well, I can see a relationship between, let's say, a suboptimal execution of certain processes and a customer satisfaction score. And so that's where process mining certainly comes into play. Now, if I can have the last slide for this section, why would you then need to consider ARIS process mining to make it a little bit more specific? I think the major benefit of ARIS process mining is its integration into your process repository. So at the moment that you say, I did my process mining, I have a discovered process, how easy is it for me to get that into my process documentation area? It's a push of a button nowadays. You click, you select, you click, the process model is documented for you in the ARIS, what we call business process analysis part. And what you can do there is then use that process to do governance on, to do further analysis on, to communicate with, to compare it to the one that you actually designed up front. And from there, you can find the different, let's say, the anomalies, you can find the differences, and that will help you to close the gap between the customer satisfaction in the end that you want and the one that you have currently. And it's not just us saying that, but of course, there's a number of analysts who say exactly the same thing. Now, I want to give it back to Rakesh for the real life example.
Yeah, so thanks. So what we've done for today's session is use the ARIS suite, which includes the ARIS process analysis bit, where you can store your process information and have all your operational processes documented. We have linked that to the customer experience module, the customer journey management module that Software AG provides, so that you have one place where you can also store all your KPIs and your, the key information around your customer journeys. And then finally, we use the third bit, which is the process mining bit, which is basically establishing hooks into your systems and actually seeing what's happening on the ground. And a lot of this is available for free trial. So we'll talk about how we've done this based on a real client example. And then we will talk about this free trial that's available for all of you to try and build something like this for your organization. So let me now just shut up and let the video play.
Welcome to the BPM-D and SAG ARIS Process Mining as a Service joint tool demonstration. SmartWorks decided to analyze their order-to-cash process using process mining in the hopes of aligning practices and generating efficiencies. Order-to-cash, or O2C, refers to an end-to-end business process behind the fulfillment of a customer's order. Here, you can view the key phases in SmartWorks' order-to-cash process, starting from the lead being generated to the payment being received. We can further understand this process through a customer's lens by looking at the customer journey map. Here, we have identified the key customer-centric KPIs and map them to the customer journey steps. With ARIS Process Mining, we can identify how to improve the customer's experience through the O2C process. Data was extracted from their ERP system and loaded into ARIS. The Process Explorer component shows the end-to-end process flow. It generates a process model from the event log data, visualizing the most important behavior of your process. Here is the typical linear pathway through the process. However, by turning up the connection scale, we can see less common pathways through the process. This builds the picture of what is happening in your organization, not just the happy path scenario. From this, we can identify rework and non-conforming pathways. We could also apply a cycle time lens to the Process Explorer. Now we can visualize process performance. The thicker the line, the slower the phase. This highlights process conformance issues where the delivery document created event is initially bypassed, leading to additional time added to the process. along with rework around the sales order approval task. As part of this process mining program, we have created a KPI dashboard app. After identifying key customer-centric O2C KPIs, we mapped a detailed description of each KPI along with the formula and events used to calculate them. This KPI dashboard enables the senior management team to have a transparent and easily digestible view of their KPIs, which can be accessed with limited or no process mining knowledge required. As an ongoing exercise, the senior management team is interested in understanding how their KPIs hold up against customer satisfaction scores, with a score of 1 indicating a highly dissatisfied customer and a score of 5 indicating a positive customer experience. This bar chart gives us an insight into the potential issues which could be leading to a poor customer experience. As we can see, the average number of delayed deliveries is significantly high when the CSAT score is anywhere between 1 to 3. The dramatic reduction of delayed deliveries past this point enables the company to achieve a high customer satisfaction score of 4 and 5, and thereby helps them to increase their customer retention rate. A regional dashboard highlighting the performance of each KPI across various countries can provide us with other insights. We can look at the trends on how each country performs across the different cycle time phases, impacting the overall customer experience. This helps us in baselining the practices around the top performers to achieve key customer-centric targets. This line chart indicates that the Philippines has the lowest average cycle time in the order to issue phase, indicating supply chain efficiency, which subsequently enables offering a positive customer experience. We can also compare the average customer satisfaction scores received by each country. For instance, the lowest being the Czech Republic, with an average CSAT score of 2.54, indicating mostly dissatisfied customers, and the highest being the Philippines, with 3.57, having mostly satisfied customers. Let's drill down further into delayed deliveries and its impact on the CSAT score. Applying attribute filters to investigate delayed deliveries when the CSAT score is between 1 and 2 indicates that 75% of these cases has a delayed delivery instance, and 0% of these cases were delivered early. On the contrary, when the CSAT score was 5 and 50% of these cases were delivered early, and delayed delivery instances were reduced to just 12%. As we dig deeper to identify the root causes for poor customer experience, we identify that 48% of urgent orders are delivered late. This is a significant indicator for SmartWorks to fix their urgent order processing, to provide customer delight and enhance their CSAT scores. Potential roadmap to improve urgent order processing could include reduce the time spent on urgent sales order approvals, reduce the amount of time of SO approval rework, and ultimately adequate inventory and logistics management, especially in the bottom performing regions. In this video, we demonstrated how the ARIS Process Mining Software as a Service offering can create process visibility to enhance the customer experience through a standard O2C process. Please visit our website bpmd.com To find out more and get in touch.
So as you see, what our a lot of our clients are doing is making CSAT real and actually analyzing what is behind each CSAT score, seeing what's causing the the lower scores. And remember, this example we've just shown the region aspects of how you can measure each region and then run a program where you can share best practices. So Philippines is doing really well, what are the practices they're following, and that can be shared to other regions. And the ARIS process analysis tool makes collaboration really easy, and hence this whole fostering of best practices is done. But regions is one of the lenses. You can also look at your CSAT by products. You can look at your CSAT by the various lenses. If you're dealing with vendors who actually then deliver your services, you can also start looking at CSAT based on each vendor and so on. And a lot of investment, because a lot of organizations have already been doing process mining for operational efficiency. I think we are seeing more demand in building a customer lens on top of it, so that the mining you do has a direct impact, and the continuous improvement initiatives that you run directly impact what's happening with the customers. As we started earlier, having this sort of an end-to-end suite that gives you features like collaboration, features like having the single source of truth in one place with all the relationships between a customer experience and the continuous improvement initiative, actually starts making customer experience strategy execution real. Right. And it helps you, one, communicate and collaborate on the customer oriented mindset across functions, and then also question all the initiatives, the improvement initiatives that come out of these, understanding the customer experience journey. It ensures that they're all tied up and are all part of a bigger improvement, project that aligns with your CX strategy. So that's briefly the benefit of this approach and the tool set that we wanted to share. Now we have a few real world examples that have actually where we've implemented parts of this framework and approach. So we're going to talk about one of our clients, a big IT services client. This was a IT services organization, big organization spread across the globe. And they brought us in, the CIO brought us in to start, continuous improvement and look at their order to cash process for improvement initiatives. And while we were having those discussions and sorting out what are the key KPIs that you want to measure in your order to cash process, obviously the finance team came in with some ideas on how quickly does it take to get the cash in once the order is raised with the client. But we also started getting engaged with the customer services team and actually started identifying some of their KPIs. And one of the key things they wanted to do was get the orders delivered on time. So they didn't worry too much about the cash, but they worried about the order delivery and getting that sorted quickly. And what we realized through this similar exercise that you saw earlier in the video, what we were able to find out was a lot of time in the whole order to cash was spent on approving purchase orders, right? So once a client has raised a sales order, just approving that and approving all the purchases that have to be made for that order added to around 15 days, because some low value POs also had to go through the whole cycle of approval and so on. And these were really low value POs. I mean, the cost of processing that PO was more than the actual cost of the PO, right? So one of the key improvements we found was to change the policy around some of these PO approvals and create a limit. And with that itself, we were able to significantly impact the timeline it took to deliver an order to the client. And there was around 15 days of savings. So that's one of the examples where we are seeing clients now not just doing process mining for operational gains, but also starting to look at how they can impact the top line by having satisfied customers or keeping the satisfied customers and so on. So that's one quick case study. In terms of if you were interested in having something like this set up for your organization or even pilot such a project, we've just listed down the key steps that you will have to think about. It's about developing a bridge between your customer strategy and your operational plans. So you start with identifying what your customer pain points are, seeing which of those are due to your operational gaps or operational people not being aware. You create these projects which are very targeted. So for example, you create a project saying reduce the delivery time to customer for X product types, because that's where we see the CSATs dropping down and so on. And then you use the whole suite to make this a collaborative exercise. And that is key. That is the biggest learning we've had through all our projects, is how do you start engaging with all the relevant teams right at the start? And that's where a tool like ARIS Process Manager or the BPA suite and the workflows stuff actually helps you. And then once you have piloted and got one of these initiatives right, you can actually use this suite to have a continuous improvement and monitoring journey set up for your organization, right? So there's a mix of an initial setup, but with some good process knowledge in-house, and some of these tools available now, and some of them are free. You can actually start playing around with this concept. So I'll hand it over to Casper to talk a bit more about, what are the tools available for you to start trialing and testing this concept. Over to you, Casper.
All right, thank you, Rakesh. Before I do, let me also share an example, not with slides, but I can at least mention we have two large customers. One's a health tech manufacturer, the other is a beverage producer, that both use our process mining solution to measure the underlying factors that influence the customer satisfaction. I mentioned OTIF, on time in full, earlier. That's what they do process mining on, and that's what they use internally to see where they need to, let's say, initiate improvement activities and to make sure that their customer satisfaction improves all across the board. There's more information around that if you contact us, but for now, that's where I need to leave it at. Now, so what Rakesh mentioned, how do you want to get started with this? As you can see on the screen, there's a free ARIS Process Mining Elements version, as we call that you can start using. That's really intuitive SaaS-based process mining solution. You simply import the data with the CSV file, and there's a whole lot of functionality already available. Of course, if you want to take a more professional approach, there is also other versions that we offer as Software AG. That can be implemented with the help of partners such as BPM-D. But it's certainly, and that's the suggestion I always do when I talk to customers around process mining, is to give it some thought on how to embed process mining into your wider process management practice. As you saw in one of the previous slides that Rakesh dealt with, this one exactly, it's a whole journey, and that whole journey is not done in either one tool alone. It's a combination of different tools and methodologies, and at the moment that you use the ARIS platform for process documentation on one hand, and you use an ARIS process mining platform on the other hand, then you have some additional, let's say, synergies at your fingertips that make your life a whole lot easier.
So thank you for attending, and we wish you a nice rest of the day and say goodbye.